how does a civilization that literally mapped the stars, developed one of the most complex writing systems on the planet, and built massive cities in the middle of a jungle, just fall apart? It's one of history's great mysteries. So let's get into it.
You've probably heard the story, right? This romantic idea of a mysterious people who were obsessed with the cosmos, and then one day, they just vanished. Left all their incredible stone cities behind for the jungle to swallow up. It's a great story, but that's all it is, a story.
Because the Maya didn't disappear. Not at all. The real story is so much more complex. It's about a slow, painful, grinding collapse that happened over centuries. And honestly, the reasons it happened are a warning that feels, well, a little too relevant today.
So first things first, let's get the story straight and completely debunk this myth of the vanished civilization once and for all.
You'll hear archaeologists talk about the classic Maya collapse, but that term is a bit misleading. It wasn't a single event. It wasn't like a switch was flipped. It was this long, drawn-out process that mostly hit the big cities in one particular area, the southern lowlands. Think of it less like an apocalypse and more like a massive political and social breakdown.
So here are the key things to remember. 1, this took hundreds of years. 2, it was regional. While cities in the south were emptying out, other Maya cities in the north were actually thriving. And 3, and this is the most important one, the Maya people are still here. Millions of their descendants are alive and well in Central America today. So this totally reframes the question, right? We're not asking, where did they go? We're asking, why did this brilliant, incredibly advanced urban way of life just become impossible to maintain?
So how did it happen? Well, researchers now believe it was a perfect storm, a combination of factors. We can think of them as 4 major clues to solving this mystery. All right, here's our case file. We're going to look at each of these clues. We've got endless warfare, an environment stretched to its breaking point, a belief system that actually got in the way of finding solutions, and finally, how all of that snowballed into a total system failure.
Let's start with clue number 1, war. The Maya world was never one big unified empire. It was a patchwork of city-states that were always competing with each other. For a long time, their wars were almost ritualistic. It was about capturing a few high-ranking enemies to sacrifice. But as time went on and resources got scarcer, that changed. War became a brutal fight for survival, aimed at the total destruction of your enemies. It became constant and widespread.
And this created a really dangerous political trap. See, for a Maya king, your entire legitimacy, your right to rule, was tied to winning battles. If you lost, you looked weak, maybe like the gods had abandoned you. So this system basically forced kings to choose war over and over again, even when it was clearly tearing their whole world apart. Now, that leads us straight to our second clue, and a really deep, kind of tragic irony. The Maya were absolute geniuses at adapting to their environment. But that very skill, their success, might have been what doomed them. I mean, they built these incredible terrace farms and massive reservoirs to support huge cities in a really tough jungle environment. It worked, so well in fact that their population exploded. But to feed everyone and build their cities, they had to clear massive amounts of forest. This led to serious soil erosion. So when a series of severe, decades-long droughts hit, and we know from geological evidence that they did, their whole system had no cushion, no buffer. The food supply just collapsed. So you've got political chaos and environmental collapse. You'd think a civilization famous for its intelligence would find a way out. And that brings us to our third and maybe the most disturbing clue. Their own worldview became a prison. They were stuck in what you might call an ideological doom loop. Here's how it worked. Step 1, a crisis hits. A drought, a famine, a bad defeat in battle. Step 2, they didn't see this as a practical problem. They saw it as the gods being angry. So step 3, what's the solution? Not new farming techniques or peace treaties. No, it was more rituals, more sacrifices, building bigger temples to please the gods. And step 4, all those things used up precious food and resources, making the real problems even worse. So, just recap. You've got constant warfare, a collapsing environment, and a belief system that's literally throwing fuel on the fire. Any one of these would be bad enough, but it's how they all smash together that brings us to our final clue, the domino effect.
Yeah, the domino effect. It wasn't one collapse, but a whole cascade of them.
It was a chain reaction where one city failing would literally drag its neighbors down with it.
Just try to picture it. A big city collapses because its farms fail. Suddenly, all the trade routes that ran through it are gone. Thousands of starving refugees pour into the neighboring cities, completely overwhelming them. Old alliances fall apart as every city is now just fighting for itself. Pretty soon, people lose all faith, not just in their kings, but in the gods themselves. And what do? They vote with their feet. They just walk away from the cities, back into the jungle, to try and survive. It was a cascade of failure that just couldn't be stopped.
Okay, so why does any of this ancient history matter to us now? Because the story of the Maya isn't just a cool historical mystery. It's a case study. Some historians even call it a textbook of failure, and it has some serious lessons for the world we're living in right now. I mean, just look at this. The parallels are kind of impossible to ignore. The Maya had endless wars between their city-states. We've got geopolitical conflict and intense political polarization. They pushed their local environment to the brink. We're dealing with global climate change and resource depletion. They were trapped by a rigid ideology that kept them from solving their problems. We often seem paralyzed by our own dogmas, unable to tackle big systemic challenges. And that leads to maybe the single most chilling lesson from all of this. The Maya were brilliant. Let's be clear, they weren't ignorant. They knew more about math and astronomy than most of Europe at the time. But in the end, none of that wisdom saved them. Because intelligence doesn't do you any good when your society is tearing itself apart. Advanced technology means nothing if the choices you make are fundamentally bad ones. The Maya are proof that a civilization can be smart, sophisticated, and innovative and still walk itself right off a cliff. Which really leaves us with one last, pretty haunting question. We look at these incredible ruins in the jungle and think of them as a cautionary tale from the distant past. But what if they aren't just a history lesson? What if they're a preview?